Today, what my session to talk about is 3301, 8308, which is the pupil management policies, and is actually a section of Ohio Administrative Code. And what Administrative Code is, it's just the rules and regulations developed by the local Ohio state agencies, and in this particular case, it's the Ohio Department of Education. And these rules are just basically designed and they're reviewed every 5 years. The current set of rules that we're working under were last approved back in 2011. There was a revision and discussion that took place over the last 3 years basically, but those rules still have not been put into effect. But they're just rules and regulations. We refer to them as the, I call it Bible a lot of times. It's the little book with the operation and safety rules that we all keep nice and close, and when something comes up, that's what we pull out and look at. That's where a lot of the rules that govern us come from. But it also is included a lot of times in your board policy, and that's where you can become a little more restrictive in it. And as we go through the rules, you can add some things to it. You just can't do any less than what the rules say, but you can add to them. And it's basically there to ensure the safety and everything in operations, transportation, students, and everybody involved. The first part of it is the school bus driver's authority and responsibility to maintain control of the students. We'll kind of talk through that as we go through. The pupil's right to due process, that is covered briefly in here, but usually more detail in your local board policy. And then the safety instructions and policies, and we'll just kind of go through them a little bit one by one. The driver's ability to maintain control, the responsibility. It's the liability. That's where the driver makes sure that students are following the rules, doing designated place of safety. If they get in a fight, they're not hurting somebody, and they're not doing something on the bus that's going to jeopardize the safety of somebody. And that's also the accountability part. The driver has to be accountable that the students behave and work with as Greg will talk here a little bit later, they do discipline a little. They have one person over discipline. Most of the smaller schools have the principals that take care of it in each individual building. And then kind of talk about what the driver can do and what are the driver's options. Sometimes we're a little limited in options. Due process, this is the one that usually the drivers struggle with a little bit, because if they're anything like my drivers, they'll wait till the kid finally gets under their skin enough. They write them up and they expect them to be off the bus for the rest of the year. But the driver also, work with them first. They have the ability to assign seats, get the troublemakers up front. I know you don't want them up front because then they're right behind you. But they're a little easier to control up front and get them away from the rest of the troublemakers back here. Usually there's about 1 or 2 ringleaders in the whole group. If we can get them under control, everything else pretty well settles down. Not always the case, but typically. And what kind of trainings do we have in place for the drivers? We've done de-escalation training. That's probably the biggest one, how the drivers, when they're dealing with parents and students, sometimes they like to keep elevating, so you made a small little issue become a big issue. Doug's done some training for us. We've done through our special ed department, PBIS, all the different things they use, CBI. And it works for the drivers just as well as it does in the classroom. And then the students, when you get into the due process, they always have their opportunity for rebuttal. That's when it gets interesting, because what they remember and what the driver reported are 2 different things. That's why years ago I never thought I'd have to use cameras on buses. We went to the 1 camera system, and this year we've upgraded to a 5 camera system with audio. It's unfortunate that we have to go that way, but that helps protect the driver, helps protect the other students. And then parents still want to argue sometimes on what that camera sees and hears. Oh, Johnny wouldn't do that. Yeah, he would, it's right here. But they still want to. And then I know our local policy doesn't permit the parents to see it. Some of the systems, the one we have doesn't do it, but you can blur out. But you just have to fall back on local policy on what you're allowed to share with parents and who's allowed to view it. Typically in our district, it's key administrators. And then if law enforcement needs to see it for something that's more severe, then usually we get into the subpoena side of things. So what are some of the twists on there? What about the rest of us? Is there a reasonable expectation for safe transportation? Would you say yes or no? Yeah. It is. I mean, students get on the bus, they expect it to be a safe, enjoyable, short ride, not have fear of getting somebody beating them up, bullying them. Bullying is the hardest thing to deal with on the bus, a lot of times it's verbal. So when you're up front, paying attention to everything that's going on in front of your drivers, you don't hear what's going on in the back of the bus. We have predominantly 84 passenger buses, so what's happening more than 3 seats in the back, further back of the driver, you don't hear it. That's why the 5-camera system has been a big help. And then at what point do the needs of the one student override everybody else? From a discipline and behavior side of things, as long as they're behaving or they're causing fights or disruptions, then they're the ones that need to be disciplined and removed or taken off or assigned up front so the other kids can have the enjoyable ride. But when we get into the whole special needs side of things, that's when it becomes a lot more challenging. You have the ED students, cross-categorical. They have the IEPs. Then it becomes much more difficult. That's why if you can ever get involved in the IEP process or have the opportunity to sit at the table with your special ed director when they're writing them, that's a good thing to do. So they don't put something in there that makes it much more difficult for us and our drivers to deal with those students. Don't put door-to-door service. Don't write those things in. That means we've actually got to walk up to the door and get them technically, because that is a legal binding document. So if you ever get the opportunity to be involved in the IEP process, it's not the most enjoyable. It's a time-consuming process, but in the end, it can make things easier for us. Especially when you get into service animals, things like that. If you have a student that needs a service animal, but also have an asthmatic student on the bus that could be allergic to the dog, those are the things you want to try to work out ahead of time. Yes.
Just one thing to add to that, because I know how long they take. They can go on for hours. So if you work with your special needs director and say, put me up front, and so that we can get the transportation piece, which is section 8, I forget how many pages into the IEP it is, but that could all be worked out, and then you can leave, because they really just need you there for that one section. So that's what, and usually 10, 15, 20 minutes, and then you were part of it, but you didn't have to sit through it 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah, section 8 is commonly referred to as behind the 8 ball, because on the IEP form, it's a black with the letter 8 in the middle, so if you can do anything to try to stay out from behind that 8 ball, it's a good thing. And what do the drivers need? From a personal standpoint, anybody disagree or agree that they need a lot sometimes? They could be a needy, but as they get more years experience and we work through and give them the proper training, the personal needs can get a little less. Professional, that's where we get into the training. Use the special ed department, use your principals, local police department. There's a lot of good resources for the training. And then we get into basically the meat of the whole Rule 8, and that's the rules that we live by each and every day. And these are the ones where we can get a little more restrictive if we want to, but we can't do less than what's written here. So when pupils shall arrive at the bus stop before the bus is scheduled to arrive. In our instance, we like to, in our board policy, it's 5 minutes before. And parents will want to argue with that a little bit, but I always try to explain to them that if we have to wait 30 seconds at each stop times 100 stops, then our schedule just goes out the window. So there's a reason we want them there earlier. Plus, with a designated place of safety, we don't want to be counting these kids across, them across, and 6 other kids come running up. This is the hardest one I had trying to explain to parents or getting them to understand. But with the help of the driver and every time and time and time again, it's like a reported message. Just have the same response each and every time. And if they get there early, they're there when they're supposed to be, you pull up, you get loaded, then we can all get on our way and stay on schedule. Then number 2 is rather self-explanatory too. It talks about they have to be waiting in location, clear traffic, and away from the bus stop. This is what we all like to refer to as a designated place of safety. This is also another one parents struggle with sometimes. Well, it's raining out. Why do they have to go stand there? Why do they have to wait? Well, there's a reason for that. We want to make sure if we had 6 cross, we know 6 are over here. When you explain it to them in the safety side of things, they usually catch on a little bit quicker. But they love to disagree with us on this one. And behavior at the bus stop, not threaten life, limb, property of an individual. This is the one for a lot of years we kind of said, we can only enforce discipline when the students are at the stop and as we're pulling up to it. But is, and Doug can probably jump in here a little bit too, a reasonable expectation that the students are to be behaving before we get there. And even, Doug was telling me this morning a little bit, even on the way to the bus stop, the administrators can get involved. Typically, we'd always refer to it as a civil matter, but the younger students, basically up to grades 5, if the principal talks to them about their behavior before the students there, they're going to listen. It's when they click into that middle school age group, and we all know what that's like, and they know everything, they don't want to listen. And then high school, they usually start settling back down a little bit. But the part about reasonable expectation of safety before the bus gets there. So like I said, usually it's been a law enforcement, but the principal, especially the high school age and the younger ones, if they get a talking to, that'll usually take care of it. Number 4 is one where the driver can use that as a discipline issue to try to deal with issues and not have to do the referrals. If we assign seats, years ago, I know when I drove, we never hardly assigned seats. But now you pretty well have to. We get younger age mixed in with older ones. So the assigned seats are a big help. Helps out if you're ever in an accident. Hopefully we're not, but we all know they happen. And the highway patrol or the police always want a seating chart. So if you got the seating chart, makes that process go so much quicker. But that's where if you have that troublesome child in the back, you can move them up front, try to deal with it on the bus before we have to go to the referral and go through the principals. A lot of the kids, sometimes they will respond pretty good, drivers. It all depends on that rapport. And what one driver's rapport is with a student can be different than another one. It takes time to develop that rapport. Classroom conduct, this one sometimes if you tell them to behave or do the behavior they have in the classroom, that's not necessarily a good thing on the school bus. Some teachers allow eating in the classroom. We'll get to the whole eating part a little bit later. Chewing gum, and some teachers' classroom conduct isn't necessarily up to what a bus driver would expect. So when it comes to the rules that a lot of us have just the 5, 10 rules posted up on the bulkhead, try to break them down to 3 or 4 of them and enforce those 3 or 4, especially the kindergartners. 3 rules are plenty. Sit down, feet on the floor, keep your hands to yourself. Then when we get into the middle school, then a little bit more, but 3 or 4 rules will make it go a lot smoother instead of having to go through all 10 of them. And then profane language. Used to be that was only the issue on the high school, middle school kids, but unfortunately now, preschoolers, kindergartners know the languages and the words a lot better than I do. And they use them quite regularly. And it comes back to what their household setting is. So we're trying to overcome in 6 hours what is happening the other 18 hours in the home. Number 8, refrain from eating and drinking on the bus except as required for medical reasons. This one's been in the rules for a lot of years. It became a topic of discussion and a lot of different feelings throughout the state when we started looking through the rules this year. Drivers use this one a lot, even when it comes to gum and everything else. The question got raised this year when it comes to athletic trips and sporting events. When a lot of times students may eat lunch at 10 o'clock in the morning, have to hop on a bus for a 2-hour trip to an away game, and then are expected to compete in that game without having eaten all the way from 10 o'clock on. And that's not necessarily a good thing. So I'm just kind of curious what everybody's different feelings are on that. Are there times when it's okay to eat? Is it age appropriate? Suckers are the ones that I always clamp down on. You don't want the suckers. But if you're on the way to a sporting event and you're leaving at 2:30, you get there at 5 and haven't eaten from 10, is it reasonable to expect the kids maybe to eat with the supervision of the coaches or somebody else overseeing them? Just kind of curious what the thoughts are on that one. Comment back there.
But what about choking? That is the biggest thing that is concerning with my drivers. The reason they want to enforce that no eating, no drinking. And yeah, I get the sports kids.
Yeah.
You get off that bus, or before you get on that bus,
And ours are, so that's,
Now, I'm with
yeah.
Yeah, it's, the choking thing is what, oh.
Yeah, and that's why suckers was always the big one for me. We'll go,
We had a great, I think, breakthrough with our football team. They had a couple of trips early in the fall where they left the bus a mess. And I shared sort of what the RC or the OIC says with the football coach. He said, no problem, say no more. And this last Friday, there were kids on their hands and knees, like we've never had cleaner buses. So, and the driver said, well, what's happening? They're like, we don't want to run another week. Because they've been running extra, I guess, for,
yeah.
it's good.
You know, I disagree with allowing the kids to eat or drink on the bus, and the reason behind that is with the food allergies that we are dealing with. You know, it's impossible to completely sanitize the bus and ensure that there's nothing left behind. Another point would be that they may be on their hands and knees cleaning and scrubbing, but when you have kids that are eating on the bus, there's going to be food debris left behind, and that will attract rats, raccoons, skunks. I mean, the list goes on and on. We actually had one bus that had a skunk get on, ride the high school route because he was so tucked up underneath the seat with the heater in it. And we have pictures of it when we stopped at East High School of the skunk getting off the bus with the kids and running across the yard.
Yeah, never had a skunk, we had a raccoon do the same thing,
But it doesn't feel like it's worth the risk. They can get off the bus and make a picnic.
What I've told my drivers is, the rule is there's no eating or drinking on the school bus. That's what the rule says. Now, if I'm driving the bus and I don't find any wrappers or food or anything, I can assume that no one's eating or drinking on the bus. There's a little message in there.
Because nowadays, less kids, both parents have left for work.
Right.
They're running late, they come.
Kids are taking care of themselves.
Yeah,
And that's where the whole assigning seats, cameras. So usually there's one or two, so once you get one, the rest will follow. Yeah, so this is the rule that's currently in effect from 2011. So this is the one we do have to go with right now. So we'll kind of keep an eye and see when the other one comes through JCAR and gets approved. And if anybody doesn't know the term JCAR, that's basically once ODE comes up and develops a rule, it has to be vetted through the Joint Legislative, can't remember what the acronym stands for, Joint Agency on Committee Rule Review or something like that, but it's a 5-year process. Yeah, so that's what we're waiting on right now. And when we get to, so that one's kind of, we'll keep an eye on it, but it's obvious that everybody has different feelings on it. Then we get into the not use tobacco on the bus. They used to be pretty self-explanatory with cigarettes or chew, and now we get into the vaping, and you know, we've even run in, we're more of a rural, but we've even run into the marijuana joints and stuff. A 6th grader, you never would have expected it, and she admitted it. And they all think the vaping's okay because they don't think it's tobacco, but it does have nicotine. So board policies are changing to adapt to that new, the Juul thing. I wasn't even familiar with the Juul. It looks like a little thumb drive. It's technology is changing for this stuff quickly too. So that's one that you can, the way it's written here now, your board policy can be more restrictive. No alcohol or drugs in the possession. Last year we had Budweiser can come running to the front, roll to the front. You just don't, years ago you didn't think that. So we go back to the bus stop, sure enough there's 2 empty cans and 1 full one. You got a little refreshment. That's the one where we did get law enforcement involved. But not throw or pass objects from or into, you know, or in the bus. This is one where some drivers pay so much attention to watching everything that's going on in the mirror, they lose focus on the front. So you have to kind of reiterate with the drivers too that your main job is watching out the front. If you're trying to write up every student for passing a note from side to side or chewing gum, you've lost distraction of what your main job is, and that's keeping an eye on the front and being safe. Carrying objects on the bus that can be held on their laps. This is a challenging one too. Aerotones, tubas. It says they're supposed to be stored safely in the back of the bus. Buses nowadays got about how much room behind the rear seats. And if you're running our buses where we're full, there's not room to set an instrument and a student on the bus. This is the one where you can work with the parents. Or recently in our district, we had the DC trip they're on right now, so everybody had to build their projects. And the Washington Monument ones came in about 6 feet high, and they want to bring them on the bus. Those things, you kind of got to work with the teachers and principals. We had the ecosystems they built one year with the 2 2-liter bottles on top of each other. Never knew about it, and then they all fall apart. There's mud all over. So this is where some of these you can work with the band director and the principal to know what's going on, to get the information to the parents that maybe that's not a good project to bring in on the bus. But then sure enough, somebody else decides to touch it, break it, and then you gotta, so band instruments are the hardest one to do. 13, that's the one where we all, with computer routing programs and everything, we have students assigned to a morning stop, their afternoon stop. And the drivers were very strict on that one. But this is also one of the ones too where you gotta educate the drivers that if you pull up to a stop in the morning, with all the situations that's happening in the homes anymore, they may have been removed and went to somebody else's house. I always tell the drivers, yeah, I know they're assigned to this stop over here. When they're there in the morning, pick them up, get them to school, then we'll sort through it. And some drivers understand, we all have them. Some drivers are understanding with that, and others are no, the rule says this. Let's get them to school, figure out during the day when we got the other 6 hours to figure it out. Now, when it comes to going home in the afternoon, if they're trying to get on the bus and they're not supposed to be, no, not unless they've got that note from the principal. And we have to work with the principals too because our buses are full, a lot of ours are. So just because they want to doesn't mean they can't. Check with us. And on the elementary side, they'll change up till 5 minutes before the bus, and it's, you know, they'll be waiting in one line, they gotta grab them out of that line and move to this line. This is where we work with the principals at. Now, because if anybody calls us up with an address change, we want 72 hours notice to change it. Here now we're trying to change things every day. It just opens up, especially the younger kids, the opportunity for error. So we stick to the afternoon, but are a little flexible in the morning. 14 is pretty well self-explanatory. You know, keep your hands inside. Most drivers, when the tree limbs are hanging down, drive close enough to where you're knocking off ears and other things. So, and that gets us to the first task of the day, where we're going to break into groups and kind of go through the rules to see if there's in your groups, try to simplify them, determine which ones are safety and behavior rules, and then we'll get together. How long
Possible behavior issues that you want addressed.
Sit down on the bus, keep the aisleway clear, keeping your hands to yourself. Violent behavior, I think that would cut down on the violent behavior issues, fighting and language. So in safety, we have our designated place of safety, eating and drinking on the bus, arriving early to the bus stop, then assigning and keeping body parts and objects in the window.
So, not to get into this afternoon's, but that's what today is it's kind of a mash of everything. This is pretty much the driver and parent responsibility, right? This is the driver and school's responsibility, right? I mean, so we can kind of see how we can manage resources to help students understand what's important. The drivers have a lot of responsibility, especially for safety. And that's where they need to focus on, especially where our students are now facing the biggest risk at the bus stop, aren't they? We really need to step back and make sure that we are getting our drivers all the support they can have to make sure the kids' assignments and bus stop assignments are safe and secure and being followed. What's your top three in the back, top 3 or 4 in the back? on behavior? I can't see that as far back, so.
Remains, as far as behavior goes, remain seated, arriving on time to the bus stop, following driver's directions. Safety, getting on the bus, your place of safety, and your behavior at the bus stop.
So again, almost the same thing, but you can almost see where we can add resources for the training and the teaching. What we did starting Bus Safety Week, and it was our idea, is that those teachers every day reviewed bus safety rules. Not classroom rules, but bus safety rules. It worked pretty well for that grade level. Again, just what you did on your behavior. It's what the teachers can help teach. Your group back in the back corner, Melanie? The other back corner?
Yes. The best back corner. Well, we felt that 1, 2, and 3 were the 3 top safety concerns. You want me to read those off since we
Yes.
value engineered it?
Absolutely.
And didn't write them down. Okay. So-
In the packet, in the packet is bigger print. In the handout is bigger print.
People shall arrive at the bus stop before the bus is scheduled to arrive.
2, I do have multimodal contacts and it just takes some minutes sometimes for me to focus. Is that right?
Pupils must wait in location clear of traffic and away from bus stops. And behavior at the school bus stop must not threaten life, limb, or property of any individual.
And what about your behavior ones?
We decided that 3, 4, and 6. Again, behavior at the school bus stop must not threaten life, limb, or property. Pupils must go directly to an available unassigned seat or assigned seat so that that bus may safely resume motion. And pupils must observe classroom conduct and obey the driver promptly and respectfully.
Does everybody here use the hot seat? Where the kid gets on, you sit in the first seat that's available, and then the next stop, you move back to your assigned seat? Nobody else does that?
No.
It's a recommended practice.
It's a great practice because we have people, like I said, people running reds are because you're taking and letting a whole stop of 20 kids, file to the back of the bus. If you get them in the front seats as quickly as possible, you can resume motion and they're not getting as frustrated as to want to pass you. But that has turned out to be a great thing that we've implemented.
Well,
The ones that are in the front seat, when you stop at the second stop, they get up and then the ones that are already seated go back to them further and then the new ones get on and sit in the front seat. So every stop progresses, the next seat goes back.
it is a lot for the drivers to get used to because kids are moving inside the bus and outside the bus at the same time. So it takes a little bit of used to that, but it does work, especially on the busiest or most dangerous roads, to get the kids seated as soon as possible. And that's the first seat they come to, and then they get up and move on. So it's different behavior. And that's where that principle really helped out with that second and third grade, because that's what we focused on, bus behavior. What creates unsafe conditions when they don't follow the self-discipline?